So we perform evaluation on seasonal forecasts to get an idea of how well they can predict the amount of rainfall, and this information can then be passed down to users so that they can make informed decisions on, for example, for farmers, what to plant in the rainfall season. So there's two main types that I focus on. One of them is a dynamical seasonal forecast, which is just the output of a computer model run performed by a meteorological office, for example, the UK Met Office. And the other forecast type that I've been focusing on is called a consensus forecast. So in East Africa, this is known as the Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum, or GAHCOF forecast. And this is produced by putting together information from lots of different predictability sources, so models, statistical analyses, and then using forecaster expertise to kind of bring this all together and generate a forecast for the season. So when we compare these two forecasts, in general we observe that there's reasonably good forecasting skill in the short range in both models, in both types of forecasts, but in the long range this is not the case. There's very little predictive skill. When looking a bit closer together to look at the differences, we find that the GAHCOF forecast has a tendency to over-predict the probability of a near normal rainfall amount in the season. And this is done primarily to avoid falsely informing users of completely the wrong outcome in years where they aren't confident. So for example, they don't want to forecast a high probability of a wet year if they aren't completely sure, and the opposite could occur, because if they forecast for a wet year and it's dry, then that can have massive impacts. So this is called being risk averse. But the downside to doing this is that in general it's more difficult to interpret the forecasts because it's sometimes not too clear the difference between a relatively wet year and a relatively dry year if you compare the two forecasts. Whilst in the dynamical model, it tends to have an overconfidence and will predict quite strongly one side or the other in any year where any signal is present.